Fine, it's fine. You may think that we are overwhelmed now, but we are not overwhelmed. We are pushing the enemy back, step by step. Ha ha ha, lock on. That's a good focus fire.
Affirmative. Orders received.
Please finish capturing. Thank you. You also need to capture. That'll have to wait. Pleased to be healing, thank you. Alright, perfect.
Long range fire support. Moving. Doing me best.
Doing me best. That is my motto every day. Every day I go into work and I'm gonna go, I'm doing me best. Trying not to get fired. Woof. Woofity doofity.
Sir, your orders?
Well, not ideal, but at least it'll give me, we can start pushing in towards the striker unit and get him off the board. Yep, keep moving like this. You need to move up and hopefully stay out of range. That would be ideal. Just stay out of the striker's range and at the same time put the striker into range. Teach the important lesson of getting outranged. Like if you move 5 spaces and I move 6 spaces, that means I'm catching up to you 1 space at a time, no matter how fast you run away from me. Also, because I'm an airplane or a helicopter, I'm not affected by terrain except for maybe mountains. So grass, roads, buildings, doesn't matter to me. Don't do nothing. That's fine, I guess, because you've just put yourself next to a heavy striker. Gonna make some of this easy, I think. I think the heavy striker will be able to take out the metal tank without much problems. You can scout for me. Nice. Yes, please finish capturing the building before you think about doing anything else. That's a good lock on. We should be able to kill you off now. Perfect.
Rifleman, ready and waiting.
Target. Lock on. 47's nice, but that's not as nice as, say, being dead. Oh, he's not in my range. Great. Alright. We'll take care of him, I guess.
Everyone, get ready.
Get ready. Here I come. Try not to have a heart attack.
Closing in on the enemy. Where's the bogey?
Out of range. Out of mind. I would love to try to repair this heavy metal, but I'm gonna guess it's probably not worth my time sitting around healing it when I could build a new one or other units. Hard to say though. That heavy metal's been on fire for like the past half hour or more.
On me, Todd.
Yeah, so yesterday when I was trying to record some episodes, somebody, I don't know if it was super local or they were farther away, but it was there was some rock music coming from outside, and it was carrying pretty clearly to where I was at. So I have to imagine there was not the party was close, and it was not, say, being held like at a stadium a mile or two away. Wonderful. So I was wondering how long it was going to last because it was a Sunday. It seems unusual to have a rock concert or some sort of rock performance on a Sunday after 8 o'clock. I mean, I guess a rock concert could be any day, but I'm thinking well, if you're trying to attract young people, and the township has an ordinance where they have to be in, there's a curfew for them at 9:30. This isn't designed for them to come, or this has to end by 9 o'clock so the kids can get home before 9:30 curfew. Or they can just ignore the curfew. I mean, hell, I did it when I was younger. But don't get caught. That's sort of the bottom line. Don't get caught if you decide to violate curfew. Not that the police would not that the police in my area would fine you or anything, but they'd give you a stern warning, and then they'd take you back to your house, and then your mom and dad would yell at you, staying out past curfew, and they'd be like, "We were so worried," and then the door will close and be like, "How the hell did you get caught?" My parents actually weren't like that. My parents were a little more strict. But then again, we didn't cause them issues. Me and my brothers and sisters didn't really cause them too many headaches, issues, other than they could be a little what's the word, overbearing, overprotective in some cases. So, it's really a matter of your opinion on what is too much or too little parenting. In a way, maybe they did just the right amount of parenting because, we, as far as I know, my siblings and I don't have any grudges. My parents didn't abuse us or anything like that, mentally, physically, emotionally. Were they perfect parents? Certainly not. Is anyone perfect? No. So they did about as good as they could do. You could argue that they were a little too strict, like I said, but none of the four of us ended up in gangs or on drugs or ended up as hobos on street. Not that should necessarily be a metric of their parenting, their worth as a parent or their parenting style, but we weren't. This is a classic middle class thing, where everyone, a lot of people think they're. This is getting into a more complicated conversation than I really want to get into in the short amount of time we have left in this episode. But a lot of people, when you ask them what class are they in, they'll say they're in middle class. They're in the middle class because they can always think of someone who's either richer than them or poorer than them. So they always feel like they're in the middle. But numbers wise, if you individually are making $20,000, $25,000 a year versus someone who's making $100,000 a year, those are two completely different realities that you're likely living with. So when I say the phrase, we didn't really want for anything, there are a lot of rich people, richer people that were richer than I was, that could easily say, well, we really never wanted for anything, but they had better opportunities, they had more stuff, whatever, And then there'll definitely be people that are poorer than me, well, poorer than my family was, and they'll say, well, we never really wanted for anything either, because they lived within their means. Their house might have been a little bigger, if they're richer, a little smaller if they're poorer. You might have qualified for a college grant if you were of a particular economic background, or if you had really good grades, which, it's not really dependent on if you're rich or poor, but it does help. But yeah, I mean, we had heat, we had food, we had shelter. We never felt like our parents my parents didn't really, my parents had the kind of debt that I want to imagine most people do, but I know they were a little bit more on the frugal side of things, where they preferred to save up their money for something and then pay for it. And at the same time, a portion of their paycheck was being invested in like investments like 401ks or stocks and bonds or, high yield savings accounts. So like all that money was being taken out before they even see it. But even after all that was said and done, we're closing into the city and the enemy's getting serious. That's true. We can proceed the way we were going, but something tells me we need to circumvent them, or we're not going to make it there. If only there was a shortcut, i.e. the plateau. There's a bit of a shortcut between me and the thing. You just have to sort of take out the striker units that are hampering your ability to go over that plateau and walk directly towards the base. Again, like I said, my parents were a little bit frugal. They would save their money up for big purchases like cars, furniture, remodels. That sort of stuff was planned ahead of time. They did not want to have loans. They didn't want to have credit card debt. They didn't want to take out loans. Obviously, they had a mortgage because and I understand my parents are older and they were in that, what we younger people would consider the privileged generation, because, they could afford, even though their interest rates were higher, they could afford houses for, if they saved up whatever, I can't even remember what it is. I think it's like 3 or 4 years of salary, and they didn't spend a dime of it, they could afford their house within 4 years. But, obviously you can't really save 100% of your salary, because you need to invest it in not only your retirement, but you have to feed yourself, and there's heat and electricity and stuff that you want to do for yourself, like go out to eat or buy a pizza. That's a little bit outside that realm of pure necessity. Plus, you decide to raise children. That's also going to be a drain, because they are they're moochers. You're there to raise, you're quote unquote there to raise them, because they're not going to make you any money, at least not short term anyways. They're not going to be able to make you money. They're going to eat the food, they're going to poop, they're going to need baths, they're going to need clothing, they're an expense, But like I said, there were 4 siblings. We never really wanted for much. I know, like I said, my parents were penny pinchers, so sometimes it felt like, we were
Ready and waiting.
trying to scrimp where we could, save a few dollars here so we can spend those dollars somewhere else, like we weren't really to the point where we needed to save hundreds. We need to save $100 a month by lowering our electric bill, and because we're barely making it, no. And it wasn't even, well, if we save this money, then we can go on vacation this summer. No, it's none of that. It's just sort of a end of the month thing. My parents would look at their budget. They would see how much money came in, how much money came out, And if more money went out of the house that month than came into the house, that made them nervous. So they would, like I said, try to tighten their budget a little bit, you know, where they could. But we never really, as children, felt that repercussion. You know, we never were like, oh, well, sorry, kids, we don't get to do XYZ this week or this month because we don't have the money for it. It was more of a, we understood, like, for instance, going out to McDonald's. That wasn't expensive back in the day, but we understood that that couldn't be an everyday thing, partly because it wasn't good for us, and partly because you're spending money on McDonald's, you know, that money is being taken away from something else that you could do that might be more fun later on down the road. A good example would be like my mom would take us to a water park, or we would go to the zoo or something, you know, something that would be an all-day event that we could all enjoy, you know, and, you know, it was special, I guess is how I guess I should put it. It was special, but that didn't mean that, you know, we had to turn out all the lights at 8 o'clock every night to ensure that, you know, we were saving the max amount of money on our electric bill every month. And I understand some people have to do that depending on, you know, how much it costs. I mean, obviously, if you live somewhere like a city, it's going to cost more than if you live in the rural area. But in the same regard, if you live in a rural area, you're going to need to drive everywhere. Whereas if you live in a city, you could probably take either public transport or, which isn't free usually, or you can walk to a number of places. So, you know, there's a little bit of, you know, offsetting things that that you get benefits of. And the way, not to get too deep into this, but the way America's sort of been designed now, walking has become more and more prohibitive. Like, you can live in a city, but like, you're probably gonna, I mean, at least if you live in the city that's closest to me, which is Pittsburgh, you're probably not going to be able to go from your apartment building. I mean, you could probably, if you work in the city, go from your apartment or maybe a local house, get on a bus, or walk to your business, depending on how close it is. But you probably do not have a grocery store that you can walk to from your apartment, you know, and instead of doing your grocery shopping once a week, you're doing your grocery shopping or twice a week or 3 times or however many times you need to grocery shop. You could do it every day and pick up the fresh food for that evening. Not that anyone wants to do that anymore for obvious reasons because we're so busy, but it was one of the many things that felt sort of old worldy about when I went to Colombia to visit my brother was, you know, they have markets everywhere. They have big markets, they have little markets. You want to buy your cigarettes, there's a market for just your cigarettes. You want to go to your grocery store is not a supermarket, but it's got fruits and vegetables and meat, and if you want specific meat, you probably have to go to a butcher, but the butcher isn't far away. He's 2-3 blocks down the road. I remember, I may have told this story before. I remember when I was younger, and we would go over to my grandmother's place, and she lived within walking distance of a small grocery store. It was about 3 or 4 blocks from our house. Now, by the time I was 6 or 7 years old, that place closed down because, as the 80s, probably this was even in some places even before this, or maybe some of these things lasted even into the 90s and 2000s, depending where you're at. But by the time you know, I was like 6 or 7, that grocery store, that mini grocery store was closed, either because they no longer could compete with the the giant grocery stores that were popping up and were expanding every time you turned around. Your local supermarket was adding another aisle, another thing to make it even bigger than it was before. Train data shows us surrounding the region of Vietos City. Looks like we have to cut our own way into work. Yeah, they're basically again giving me a hint that there's more than one way to skin a cat, if you will. And if you want to, you could, do what I'm doing right now, which is just sort of the slow, plodding movement towards the base, because I'm also looking to see if there are any hidden secret areas that they're trying to hide from me, so that I have to come back and look for them again. But they don't appear to be hidden so much that it's going to be impossible to find. But I mean, they appear on the map with just a little bit of searching is what I'm trying to say. But getting back to my original thought on the grocery stores, yeah, by the time, I was like 6 or 7, all these little tiny local grocery stores that would be 3 blocks down from your house were gone. Either because the people that worked there closed up, they couldn't compete, or whatever. And then I know, at least in the town my grandmother lived, they put a supermarket at the bottom of the hill. Well, that's if you really want to walk that far, that's fine. But I mean, you're talking a number of blocks. I mean, like, if you think of a city block, you're probably looking at a good 20 or so blocks in one direction. And because Pennsylvania is a very hilly area, my grandmother lived up on a hill. So walking 2 blocks up a hill is not a problem. Walking 20 blocks up a hill is a problem. So everyone, I'm not saying my grandmother and grandfather didn't own a car. Of course they owned a car. They'd owned a car since before my dad was born. But, it was easier for, say, when my grandfather was out at work, my grandmother to walk to the local store to pick up, food, bread, milk, the basics. Though, again, if we go far enough back, I've heard stories about the milkman, not the milkman as in the milkman coming to impregnate your wife, but as in like a legitimate, the guy comes to your door and brings you your fresh milk from the farm every day. And then if you wanted to, you could get cream or half and half, and they would bring that in bottles, and then you would give back your old bottles, and they would wash and recycle, basically reuse them. That's what they were doing, because why wouldn't you? And not that I'm really longing for a time where I walk 3 blocks to my local grocery store, but it's something different, I guess. That's what I should say. It's something interesting. That you're no longer given the option between walking and driving to the grocery store in the suburbs. It's, well, if you want to go to the grocery store, you not only need to have a car or walk a very, 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 very long distance now, or have your house near a grocery store, I guess. Or you have to have a car, which many people in the United States do, but it's a requirement, not an option at that point. Anyways, let's finish up this capture here in a minute. Unless this is gonna kill. Alright, well, I guess that is the mission. We're gonna proceed, and on the next episode, we're gonna move on to the next mission, I guess. So until then, have a good one.